Hi everyone, I'm the old man from Japan. About 15 years ago, one of the ministers of Japan said, Japan is one nation, one civilization, one language, one culture, one race. And I think that pretty accurately describes Japan. It's unique. He got in a little trouble for the one race feature, but nonetheless it's true. Japan has been isolated from its very beginnings. In 600 BC, 660 BC to be specific, the first emperor was named Jimmu, and mythology has him descending from the sun goddess. But the emperor's family has been continuous from then until today. It's the longest of any such family in the world. The people of Japan were only replaced once. Up until about 300 BC, the people were hunter-gatherers. And then the rice culture came in, not by learning, but by actually being brought in by people. Where they came from is not very sure, very well known, but they brought in a new culture of raising wet rice, and that changed Japan dramatically because the hunter-gatherers and the rice culture were not compatible, and the rice culture outlasted the hunter-gatherers. They gradually disappeared, and the rice culture took over. And the reason is because rice culture requires a lot of organization. You can't have just a small tribal family running a rice farm. You need lots of people to plant the rice and cultivate it and create the fields to begin with, to harvest the rice and store it and distribute it. It takes a community, an organized community. So that changed Japan rather dramatically around 300 BC, and that culture has survived to this day. After the rice culture began, there was trade with China, and Chinese influence was significant. In around 500 AD, Confucian teaching took hold, and Buddhism took hold in Japan. But before that, there was the Shinto religion that is entirely Japanese. It's a unique religion. Some say it isn't even a religion, it's more of a belief system. But then what is a religion? So anyway, Shinto and Confucius and Buddhism all coexist and still influence Japanese life today. The language of Japan also developed independently, no outside influence. The spoken language. The written language was originally adopted from the Chinese, but it didn't really work. The Chinese and Japanese languages are totally different. And in fact, Japanese language is totally different from any language. Its structure is different, its grammar is different, the whole thing is different. But the written language they didn't have initially, and so they adopted Chinese characters to represent words. But then they also had a problem because they conjugate words differently from the Chinese, and so they had to add sounds to the Chinese words. And what they did was use other Chinese characters for their sound, for the word they represented. So you would have a Chinese character for some noun, say, or some adjective, and then there would be modifications to it, which were also Chinese characters. And when you read it, you had to say to each character, are you here for your meaning, or are you here for your sound? So finally, in, I've forgotten when, early hundreds BC, AD, a Japanese man visiting China came back and developed a phonetic language to augment the Chinese characters to produce the sounds that are needed to conjugate the words. So now, to this day, there are two written phonetic languages, hiragana and katakana, which are like, to us, they're kind of like printed and cursive characters, and Chinese characters, all mixed together in one sentence. And in fact, you'll even find romaji, which is a Japanese word spelled with English characters, to in the same sentence. So you can have four different character sets in one language, in one sentence. So you see words like Honda and Subaru and Sony and so on written in romaji so that they can be used overseas. One nation, one civilization, one culture, one language, and one race all represent Japan today. Now, they have a problem. The population is declining rapidly because people are not marrying and having enough children, and so they're having to bring in foreign workers, and that's going to thin out the race, and they're very upset about that. They don't like the idea of not being pure Japanese. So that's a problem that the government is directly attacking right now, and we'll talk about that some other day. Some people think that the use of the strange character sets for their written language is a handicap in international trade, but they love it and they want to stay with it. So those are some of the things that you encounter. You need to understand. Oh, so Confucianism. Confucius said, among other things, you respect your elders, you respect your superiors, and you honor your group. You work for the goals of the group that you belong to, not for yourself. So, for instance, when I was entertaining students from Japan, and I'd ask one of them to stand for a photograph, she or she would wave to her friends and say, "Come over, we're going to have our picture taken." They didn't want to be individuals, they wanted to be a group. Teachers in America have to learn, don't ask a question of the class, ask a question directly to an individual, because the Japanese and Chinese students won't raise their hand and stand out. They don't want to stand out, they want to be part of a group. So those are some of the things that you encounter when you first start working with Asian people, and especially Japanese people. Another is respect. The bowing is real. Most say that's respect because it's a crowded island, but I say for thousands of years the samurai ruled the nation, and you could have your head cut off if you insulted one. So you learned respect very quickly, and that has continued to this day. Not as dramatically as it used to be. I'm sure people would bow all the way to their head on the ground when a daimyo or a samurai came by, because they didn't want their head cut off. But now a polite bow is adequate. So those are some of the things I encountered. I hope that helps you understand a little bit about Japanese people, and we'll be doing more and more over the next several videos. So that's it for now. Bye-bye.